Uh-oh. You know what I forgot? I forgot to put sermon in there, didn't I? And that's a bad thing, because I've got something I want to play out of that in just a minute. Can you find that over there on the right, in that list of things? I'm sorry to foul you up. That just slipped my mind totally. I can do what Johnny Carson always used to do. Da, 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 da. I don't think that's going to work. Thank you. Money, like getting computer programs ready, money is a tricky animal. Is it good or bad? And then when you talk about that, you've got to ask the question, when is it good and when is it bad? How much is enough? How much is too much? How much should I keep? How much should I give away? Should I save money? And when I save money, when do I cross over not just into saving money, but hoarding money? John Wesley says money is for food for the hungry, drink for the thirsty, raiment for the naked. It gives to the traveler and to the stranger where to lay his head. By it we may supply the place of a husband to the widow, or of a father to the fatherless. We may be defense for the oppressed, a means of health to the sick, of ease to them that are in pain. It may be as eyes to the blind, as feet to the lame. Yes, a lifter up from the gates of death. All of those great benefits, those good things about money, and yet we know, on the other hand, the kind of temptation that money can be. One of the greatest temptations to evil that we know of, a source of arrogance and pride, a means of supporting all sorts of evil habits, a pathway to corruption and to the vice that takes control of our hearts and just destroys our soul. You guys know about Jack Benny. Jack Benny was for those of you who are way too young to remember, Jack Benny was a comedian, first on radio and then on television. Jack Benny's persona that he tried to portray in all of his appearances was that he was this miserly skinflint. He loved money above all things. Jack has been through a series of little mishaps, has been stuck outside of Don Wilson's house, and it's beginning to rain, and there he is confronted by a robber.
I knew it! I'm going to get sold. Oh, the heck with it. I'm going inside the house, ready or not. If he thinks I'm going to...
Stick him up, buddy. You heard me. Stick him up.
Are you a burglar?
Who else works in lousy weather like this?
Look, mister.
Keep those hands up. Now, come on. Your money or your life? I said your money or your life.
I'm thinking it over.
On our money is printed the words, "In God we trust." Is that sarcasm? I've heard it talked about sarcastically. This is indeed our God, and we would do just about anything to get it. We would do just about anything to keep it. This is the way we judge people, not so much whether they're good or bad, but whether they're competent or incompetent, or whether they are industrious or lazy or foolish or wise. And we all know that means having that means that having money means that somebody is competent, that they are industrious, they're foolish, and they're indispensable, or they're wise and they're indispensable. Maybe the words, though, on our money is a warning. Not this is our God, but our God is the true God of heaven and earth. And money can be used to accomplish good things, to enjoy good lives, and to be a blessing to the people around us if we have our hearts in the right place at the very beginning. Money, after all, is a pretty good barometer of our spiritual commitments, isn't it? And Jesus said, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And a little bit later in this same chapter, Jesus tells about the rich man and Lazarus. The rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen and lived in luxury every day, according to Luke 16:19. And Lazarus, the poor man who was covered with sores and longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs came to lick his sores. And that business about dogs is not there to try to convince you that there's some medicinal value to dog spit, but it's intended to disgust you with the idea of this man's helplessness. He's not even able to fight the dogs off. The time came when the beggar died and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried. And in Hades, where he was in torment. And nothing is said about good deeds or bad deeds, whether Lazarus was a particularly good man who lived a good life, or whether the rich man was a particularly evil man who lived an evil life. One was rich, the other was poor. The poor man died, went to this banquet, this wonderful banquet that Abraham is serving. One wound up in torment. Now, I'm pretty sure that Jesus was not trying to say that rich people are hellbound, while poor people are automatically headed for heaven. But I am just as sure that Jesus took a shortcut in this story. The rich man winds up in torment. The poor man winds up in luxury. I'm sure he did that to make a point. That money is a really good indicator of where your heart is, of where your spiritual commitments lie. Whether on the side of God's character of mercy and love, or on the side of Satan's selfishness and hatred. Philip Yancey is a Christian writer that you may have read. He wrote books like What's So Amazing About Grace, The Jesus I Never Knew, Finding God in Unexpected Places. He wrote just a whole mess of books. But he is a very deeply spiritual and insightful writer. And he wrote in one of his books, many Christians have one issue that haunts them and never falls silent. For some, it is sexual identity. For others, it's a permanent battle against doubt. The issue that haunts me, he says, is money. It hangs over me. It keeps me off balance, restless, uncomfortable, nervous. I feel pulled in opposite directions over the money issue. Sometimes I want to sell all that I own and join a Christian commune and live out my days in intentional poverty. At other times, I want to rid myself of guilt and just enjoy the fruit of our nation's prosperity. Mostly, he says, I wish that I didn't have to think about money at all. But I must somehow come to terms with the Bible's very strong statements about money. Jesus tells his disciples at the beginning of Luke 16 about a parable about the use of money. He says there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be manager any longer. The manager said to himself, what shall I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. So he called in each one of his master's debtors. He asked the first, how much do you owe my master? 900 gallons of olive oil, he replied. The manager told him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 450. Then he asked the second, and how much do you owe? 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, take your bill and make it 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. Now, the parable falls, I think, into three parts. The first part is the master condemns his manager for wasting his money. The second part, the manager comes up with a way to save himself when he's fired by using the money that's available to him and using it generously. And then the third part of the parable is the master praises the manager for acting wisely. I think if you wanted to boil the lesson of the parable down to a single statement, it would simply be this. When am I wasting money? Or when you waste money, you're condemned. And when you use it generously, you'll be praised. So I suppose the question that really tortures us, the question that tortures Philip Yancey is, when am I wasting money and when am I using it wisely? John Wesley, in that sermon that I've already referred to, talking about the use of money, takes off from this parable with three recommendations. He says, you should gain all you can, you should save all you can, and you should give all you can. By gaining all you can, Wesley means that we should use our God-given talents, and we should be responsible in our work, and we should pursue occupations that are healthy, both spiritually and physically. And by being people of integrity and people of honesty who would never take advantage of our neighbors, then we can make great gain, he says. And we ought to be responsible in working hard and being the kind of people of integrity and honesty that make great gain. By save all you can, Wesley doesn't mean put it in the bank, save it, put it up for a rainy day, hoard your money. He means rather spend your money wisely. Provide for yourself and for your family, he says, so that they can be healthy and enjoy prosperity's freedom. And don't just throw your money away on vain pleasures or ungodly desires, but make decisions about how you spend your money in ways that line up with your spiritual goals and priorities to become more godly people or to enjoy the benefits of godly living. And then by give all you can, he means after you've provided for your family, if you have a surplus, then share that surplus to benefit the people who need you. First of all, he says, to your Christian brothers and sisters. And then he says, if there is still a surplus, everybody else. I think that's probably pretty good biblical and godly advice. Jesus said, verse 9 of Luke 16, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it's gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you've not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you've not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Now, the Pharisees who loved money heard all this and were sneering at Jesus. He said to them, you're the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your hearts. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight. The law and the prophets were proclaimed until John. Since that time, the good news of the kingdom of God is being preached, and everyone is forcing their way into it. It is easier for heaven and earth to disappear than for the least stroke of a pen to drop out of the law. In that reading, first of all, I want you to see that the wise use of money leads you to be welcomed into eternal dwellings. This is more than a benefit, I think. It's more like a standard by which you can judge whether you're using your money wisely. Are people glad for what you're doing, or are they slightly uneasy with what you're doing? Are people congratulating you on what you're doing, or are they kind of put off by the way that you spend your money? Would you be welcomed by those you meet in heaven, or would you be rejected and resented by them? This whole thing sounds a little bit like the golden rule. You remember the golden rule? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Luke has talked about this already in Luke 6, or Jesus has. But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to them the other also. If someone takes your coat, don't withhold your shirt from them. And then notice how quickly he turns to the way that we use our money. Give to everyone who asks you. And if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies. Do good to them. Lend to them without expecting to get anything back. then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because He is kind to the ungrateful and to the wicked. And there's the wise use of money. Not to resent the need of other people, but to sympathize with it. And of sympathy of a type that not only makes you sorry that they're in that position, but sympathy of a type that makes you want to get involved, that causes you to help them to get out of that situation that they're in. Think about what that's going to be like. To spend your money so that people welcome you into eternal dwellings, when all of those thousands upon thousands of people who are converted to Christ are cheering for you as you walk through the gates because you supported a missionary somewhere like India or Ecuador or some other place. Think about what it's going to be like when some woman emerges from the crowd to give you a hug and a kiss on the cheek and tell you, you know what, your support for this abused women's shelter saved my life and made a difference in everything and saved me from a living hell. Think about what it's going to be like when somebody grabs your hand to introduce you around. This is the one who helped my mom decide not against aborting me. And this is the one who supported her and who helped her and bought her food and helped her get a job, and she straightened her life out, and I'm here today because of that. Or when someone simply says, you know, I was at the end of my rope and didn't know what else to do, and you gave me something to eat. And it gave me hope, and I knew someone cared for me, and I turned my life around. Jesus said, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself so that when it's gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Secondly, wise use of money demands trustworthiness even in little things. Jesus said, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. And I'm not sure that that's a hard and fast principle that the world lives by or that the world operates by. I know a woman who was a trusted fund manager for a small investment fund, and she did her job really well. She did it so well, in fact, that the fund began to grow, it began to multiply, it began to grow exponentially. It was getting to be a huge fund. And she began to think, you know, there's so much money in this fund, they're not going to miss any of this. And she embezzled several $1,000s. She was trustworthy in the little things, but she was untrustworthy when they got big. And so I'm not sure that Jesus is trying to just make an overall principle about the way money works or about the way people work or anything like that. But I do know that this is God's principle. You can be generous only when if you can be generous when you have only a minimum wage job, taking care of your responsibilities to be sure, but not shutting your heart to the neediness around you because you want to honor God, then I don't think that I don't worry about you quite as much when you work hard and work your way up to a huge paycheck. Because if you desire to honor God with those little things, you'll be the same sort of person you were when you were just starting out, only on a bigger scale. I think about high school students, and I think about university students. You know, it really begins for you now. And you'd say, well, you know, I'm just kind of looking for a good time. Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? But, you know, now is the time to really get serious about being a disciple of Jesus. I don't know where he's trying to lead you. You may not think he's leading you much of any place, you know, kind of maybe down to McDonald's to get a minimum wage job, slinging French fries and cheap hamburgers. Just trying to make ends meet, just trying to make a car payment, just trying to buy gasoline, or maybe you're just working at home for whatever pittance mom and dad can afford to pay you. It just kind of barely gets me by, you know. It buys me a few extras here and there, maybe some clothes or maybe a meal once in a while. It's not much, and you're probably right. But the question is, are you honoring God with it? Are you using it for good things and not for evil things? Are you learning how to use it to accomplish good with it? That doesn't mean you have to take all you earn and spend it on someone else, but are you giving to God? What are you giving to God even out of that little bit? How does what you do with the little bit you get show how you love Jesus? Because Jesus is very clear. If you're trustworthy in little things, then you're trustworthy in the big things. Is he leading you to get involved in some volunteer service? Helping the homeless, or cleaning a park, or working in some sort of service somewhere, answering phones, or organizing warehouses, or cleaning bathrooms, or mowing grass for the elderly? But this is where it begins. This is where it really starts, when you have to squeeze it in. When you have to really sacrifice to find the time or the money or the energy, and when you're proving yourself trustworthy in those little things, that's really where it all starts. Thirdly, wise use of money leads you to being entrusted with true riches. And Jesus is not talking here about those sermons that I've even preached that I now call greedy giving. Give to the Lord, and the Lord will outgive you back. And so, we're sitting here figuring out, how much do I have to give to get good stuff? Kind of a chain letter idea, I guess, Send $1 to the person whose name is at the top of the list and put your name on the bottom, and within a week you'll be rich. I don't think Jesus is trying to do that. I think he is promising that if we learn the lessons of using money wisely, being generous, being sympathetic to people in trouble, developing a vision for using the resources that God has blessed us with, if we really learn the lessons of using money wisely, we'll be given spiritual blessings beyond our imagination, even more opportunities to be generous. Or even growing in the image of Jesus, becoming more and more like him in our hearts and in our actions, and in the end, heaven itself. The Pharisees who loved money heard all this and were sneering at Jesus. I don't know what they were sneering about. I've really tried to figure out, what is it they're so upset about? Are they upset that he's saying money is a real spiritual indicator of your spirituality? Are they upset because he's saying good people can't have money? Or are they just simply sneering at Jesus because he dares to talk about money in the same breath that he talks about religion? Money doesn't have anything to do with religion. He said to them, you're the ones who justify yourself in the eyes of others, but God knows your hearts. God knows your heart. Because for one thing, he watches how you spend your money. Being a disciple is a lot more than just attending church and praying and reading your Bible. It's also about writing checks and about swiping debit cards and about throwing spare change in coffee cans. It's about learning how to open your heart and really care about, really share the blessings that God has given you. And learning like that doesn't come by just reading and praying and thinking. It only comes by experience, by doing it. Lough tells about a museum in Deadwood, South Dakota, where he grew up. The museum displays artifacts from the gold rush, something over 100 years ago in the Black Hills of South Dakota. And he says, in that museum there is displayed a rock that has an inscription scratched into it by a desperate prospector. The inscription says, I lost my gun, I lost my horse, I'm out of food, the Indians are after me, but I've got all the gold I can carry. Jesus is calling you to be a child of God's kingdom, someone who lives by God's rules and God's priorities and God's purposes. If you need to repent of not being that, if you need to confess that Jesus is Lord and become his disciple by being baptized into Christ, or if you need to confess a failure to follow as you promised you would, then would you come while we're standing and singing, please? Let's stand.